All right, so you have, let me get that off the screen. You have this example at the bottom underneath your circle diagrams. So we're going to go ahead and walk through this together. They give you a circle diagram right here with different wedges, and some of these wedges should look familiar because we just went through and looked at how the sizes of the wedges change. Okay, so let's look at number 1. It says determine the probability of landing in each part. Oh, and first of all, we're not doing the angle ruler part, so go ahead and cross that off. Determine the probability of landing in each part or region of the spinner. So let's look at the gray part. If I take a look at this wedge, I'm going to look for a wedge on my circle diagrams. Let me pull that up there. That looks very similar. Well, if I look, I notice that, oh, this is like a 90-degree angle, which I found 1/4 to look like a 90-degree angle. So the probability of landing in the gray area is 1/4, or we could say it's 25%. Okay. Let's take a look at the checked area. So here's the checked area. I'm looking at that wedge, and I'm trying to figure out, where or, what wedge would match this wedge on my circle diagram. Well, if I look, this wedge is very similar to the size of my wedges that are a 6. So that is, the probability would be 1 out of 6, or 16 2/3%. My next one is diagonal lines, and if I take a look at that wedge, the size of that wedge matches up with the size of a wedge that's a 1/3. So this wedge would have the probability of 1/3, or 33 1/3%. Wavy lines, if I take a look, that's a pretty small wedge, and our smallest wedge we have is 1/12, and it looks very similar. So this is 1/12, or 8.3%. And last but not least, we have our unmarked one, which is very similar to our wedge that's labeled 1/8. So the probability of getting the unmarked would be 1 out of 8, or 12.5%. Now, if you go down here, you have number 2, and it says you spin the spinner 40 times. How many times would you expect it to land in each of these regions? So you actually are doing the experiment of spinning this spinner 40 times. And they want to know about how many of those times will a certain one of those wedges land. And so, for example, maybe it's the swirly or the squiggly lined wedge. For example, it could be 5 out of the 40 times it might land there. But we have to use what we learned up here to figure out these numbers. Okay, so for diagonal lines, we found that it's going to land in that area 1/3 of the time, or 33 1/3%. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our calculator, and we're going to actually find about how much it should land on there. All right, so if I put in my calculator 33 1/3 as a decimal, that would be 0.3333 repeating. Okay, I'm going to multiply that, the percentage, by 40, the amount of trials we've actually completed. When I do that, here's the number I get, 13.333. I can't have 1/3 of a spin, so I'm going to round this up to its up or down, or keep it the same, to its whole number. So this would be about 13 times out of the 40 it will land in the diagonal lined area. Our next one is gray, and if we look back up here, gray is 1/4 of this circle diagram. So I'm going to use, again, if I look down here, the percentage and the decimal and the fraction, it's right here. So I'm going to put in the decimal because it's easier to work with decimals rather than whole percent. 1/4 as a decimal is 0.25. And again, I'm doing this 40 times, so I'm going to multiply it by 40. And I get how many spins? About 10. 10 times out of the 40, it should land in the gray area. And then we have this unmarked area. If we look over here, we found that it should land about an 8. Probability of landing in the unmarked area is 1/8, or 12.5%. Again, if I look at my circle diagram, 1/8 as a decimal is 0.125, and we like to use decimals rather than percents when we're entering these into the calculator. So 0.125, we have 40 trials in all. I'm going to multiply that by 40, and it's going to land about 5 times out of the 40. Now, if you go to add these numerators, they're not going to add up the total amount of trials because we haven't figured out about how many times it should land on checked and wavy lines. So we can't technically add these up yet. You can go back and check these if you would like, but we're not going to add these up because we don't have all of the data.